discussing the protocol. So imagine when we can send two types of packets. First of all, which I call action 1, will send a point. Well, it will send, so here is the action 1. Well, it is converted into a message then sent. We send the action which can be either 1 or 2. The action 1 means that we are sending a point, so you should receive a point and draw it on your screen. And the action 2 is like we are requesting you to clean the board. Are you going to do it or not? Besides this, we also send the color, because it is important for us that every user has a different color, and the color represents basically the ID of the user. So in such a way we can distinguish the users and we are able to know who sends to us this message. The color is represented by 3 ints, which basically is red, green and blue, RGB. Another problem which appeared in the process of developing this protocol was that we want this protocol be really generic and be used on different devices with different screen shapes. Well, in our case we are talking about an iPad and an iPhone, but let's suppose that we are implementing this protocol on a Windows machine, on a PC, which has a different screen. So in order to have a correct drawing, we send the ratio of our screen, which is basically the total X on total Y. And here also we send the point, which is the float and represent the percent of the X. Like if we are clicking somewhere here on our screen, it represents approximately 10% of our total X. So we send 0.1. So here these points are represented like from 0 to 1, two floats. And a specific for iOS was that because of the drawing, I need also to specify when I send the endpoint of a line. Imagine if a user draws, I need to know when he ends his line, because otherwise, if the user starts another line and I did not specify that this was the endpoint, the endpoint of this line and the start point of that line will be united. Well, we will create a line here. Okay, so this is the first case when we send a point, and the second case when we want to clear the screen. Here we just send the action 2, the color RGB, and the timeout. What's timeout? Well, if I, for example, want to clear the board and I say, well guys, let's clear the board, but it turns to me that after an hour nobody responds, so no one wants to clear the board. So we should send a time when, which is the time, this time represents the amount of time which we should wait until we again verify if all users agreed. If all users are if all users agree to clear the board, so we clean the board. If not, the timeout is set again to a number. In my program I set it to 10, but if someone sends me, for example, this packet, and I receive the timeout, for example, a minute, I set my variable to a minute, but basically it's in seconds, an int. Okay, so this is what we are sending. Let's see what we are receiving and what we are doing when we are receiving the packets. Well, first of all, important part, broadcasting, it's simply sending the packets to everyone, even to ourselves. So the important thing that I do not want to receive or interpret somehow the packets which come from myself, because I send them to someone else, someone else. That is why I verify here. Well, here if the receive address is not identical to my address. These are two strings because this function basically interprets an unsigned int and transforms it into a readable address of type 255.255 blah blah blah. So we use here comparison of strings. But where do I get my address? Well, simple. Before actually joining the chat of drawing, I send a packet to to broadcast, but with a different port number, and of course I receive it. And if my address is not set yet, I set it because the receive address is my address, and then I set the networking to my port, which is the actual port. This is the constant where all the users are on. Well, all the users are using this port, and I start to send the actual packets. Well, next, first I compared my address with the receiver address, and if they are identical, I simply continue. What is continue? Why continue? Because we are in a while loop. Well, yeah, I also forgot to mention that when the application starts, I basically perform selector in the background. Well, basically I said take another thread and start receiving packets while I'm going to do something else. Okay, so I verified if indeed this is not my address and this message came from somewhere else. I verify the action. Well, I scan the action from the message, and if the action is 1, that means that I should store this point and draw it. The idea is that first I should verify which user sent me this packet. In order to distinguish user, I created a separate structure which I am going to discuss now, where here it is. Well, I named it user, which contains simply the R, G and B. Every user probably has a different ratio. Also, every user has an array of points. This is simply an X and Y coordinate containing here an array of points which indicates which points is he drawing right now. Also the number of points, and the bool, which is a boolean or a 0 or 1, which verifies if we want or not to clear the board. Coming back here. So when I receive a point, I check the color. If this color is different from mine, I start searching in my array of users if I have this user already registered. If not, I register him. What's happening if a user has the same color as mine? First of all, how it could happen? Well, when a user starts the game, it selects a random color, and of course there is a very small probability that two users can have the same color. But for example, if I enter it and the network and I receive a packet from a different user, because I already verified the address, so it's a different user, but this user has the same color, this means that I should change my color. And that's done here, because this function is actually the rand used in Objective-C. So I reset my colors. If not, everything is okay. I set the new point to my user. And also, I talked about endpoint earlier. So if this is the endpoint, I basically draw the entire line, and I get rid of the points from the user structure because I don't need them anymore, because the line will be stored somewhere else. Well, it's related to drawing. Now, what's happening if we are talking about action 2? Well, I said the action 2 is about clearing the screen. I received the timeout, and well, I need to set my timeout. If no one requested me until now to clear my screen, my variable timeout will be 0. So if my timeout is 0, or my timeout is greater than time, so I receive the packet that needs to clear the screen quicker, I set my timeout. Then I perform this message, which is nothing else but the alert, where it states that blah blah blah, someone wants to clear the screen. Then if clear screen is not called, I call the function clear screen again in a different thread. Well, let's see what clear screen does. So here is the clear screen. While timeout, I decrement the timeout and I sleep a second. Basically, timeout is in seconds. So what I will have in the end is that I will wait this amount of seconds, and when the time ends, it's timeout, and I check if indeed all the users agreed to clear the screen. So if is there a user which is not which disagreed to clear the screen, this variable is set to no, basically to 0, and I check if all agree to clear, I clear the screen. Otherwise, I set the clear from all the users to no, and I show the corresponding alert that, for example, not all users agree to clear the board, or when all the users agree to clear the board, basically I reset the display, the drawing, and I show that all users agreed. Yeah, it's important to mention that in the end I should close the socket. Let's see what we have here. Yes. Well, related to gestures, well, while I'm panning, like moving our mouse, I simply send the packet. Yeah, an interesting point here. It's important to state that the UDP is not reliable and not connection oriented. It's the packets may arrive in a different order. So one problem may happen when the endpoint is not delivered. That's why if the gesture is just recognized state ended, this means that this is the last point which we transmit. I send it 3 times in order to be sure that it will arrive. And in the end of the function, I send the packet with the corresponding value, which is basically the point. Well, there are many other things related to drawing, to gestures, to device orientation, which are quite cool, but are not related to networking. Yeah, the interesting thing is how we handle. Well, I already explained what we are doing when 2 users have the same color generated at random. Well, simply the first user which receives a similar color as his changes his color. And what happens when a message comes from a different device? Well, we have the ratio, and we simply interpret the received packet in the following way. So here it is. So our point, which is actually a float from 0 to 1, is multiplied with our total x and our total y, but y is also multiplied with our ratio over user ratio. So basically we adjust the difference of the screen size and the ratio of total x over total y. And basically that's it. While talking about drawing, what we else have here? Well, I think I discussed almost all. Yeah, maybe I will also need to mention the libraries which I imported. But basically that's it. Thank you.